Hey everyone, this is Spencer editing the video. I had some issues with the audio on my track specifically, kind of getting out of sync about a half an hour or so in. So I apologize for that. I tried to get it as clean as I could, but there are a couple places where my voice overlaps. So sorry about that, guys.
Hello and welcome once again to episode 17 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name once again is Dimitri and I'll be your host for this episode, and I am joined today by my fellow completionists, Fernando and
Hello, hello.
Spencer. So
Hey.
before we get into our main topics, Spencer, while we were starting up the call, I heard a familiar chime in the background. Care to chime in with what that was?
Yes, that was a new MacBook Air, which previously I said I probably wouldn't be buying anything, and yet here I am. I'm in the middle of trying to fix it. I've kind of broken it already. I had some issues. I bought it last night. I braved Black Friday to go sit in the Best Buy parking lot for them to bring it out to me, and it was like an hour and a half wait. It was kind of long, but I have it. Started, installing everything, and then my App Store downloads randomly wouldn't install. They would just sit on waiting for literally hours. So this morning I am trying to reinstall macOS, and the problem is macOS has some weird issues right now with just going into recovery mode and reinstalling macOS. It doesn't do it for some reason. It always errors out. So this morning I've been, making a bootable USB from another Mac and trying to do it over here. So it's been a fun morning, but I hope that's not necessarily the case for everyone. I haven't really had much time to play with it because it's just kind of been in this broken state for the last 12 hours or so.
Damn, that sucks.
I know for the machines that must not be named,
super stoked.
you could use Apple Configurator from another Mac to kind of reflash them because they're all iOS devices.
Yeah.
Now. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I tried to do that, and it oh man, it just said that it has another error. I tried to do Apple Configurator, but it would never go into DFU mode, so I'm not quite sure what happened. And now my USB just said that it didn't work. It has the same error, so I guess I'm gonna have to get Apple Configurator to work somehow.
One thing you can always try is just like continuously reset that NVRAM. I don't know if there is NVRAM anymore. Brand new machines, new architectures. So like reset that NVRAM, reset that PRAM, smash that system power controller.
What's the
SPM?
Yep, yeah, SP-ROM, yep, or whatever.
And leave a comment.
Oh man! All right, well, and subscribe.
So if we hear future chimes throughout the episode, we'll know you're debugging this issue. So keep us updated if you make any progress.
I'll try to not do it during this, but I'll let you guys know how it goes. Maybe on the next episode or something, unless I have just like a big old thin and light paperweight here going on. We'll see. To be continued. Make sure you listen to the next episode. Our very own
follow-up starting next episode. Next time on Code Completion. So that said, a few weeks ago, Apple has decided to change the commission rate from 30% to 15% for all sales on the App Store. What could this mean? So we kind of just glossed over this when it happened because we had way more interesting topics to talk about. But now that the news is kind of settled and we've heard lots of people's opinions, I wanted to hear what your guys' take is on this change, whether it's something that Apple is doing from the good of their heart, or if it's something that external pressures have kind of forced them to, and whether it even matters in the long run. So, Fernando, why don't you start?
This is a difficult topic for sure. Just thinking about the facts, like I've seen on Twitter in my like immediate sphere that it is in general a very positive a very positive thing for a lot of indie developers. Like it's a if you take into account like some weird percentages, it's not only 15, it goes up to like 21% effective, like an effective raise for indies. So I think that's amazing, but I don't know. I'm on the I don't know if you guys have seen the DHH rant
I ignore
on Twitter.
those.
No,
No.
DHH is the creator of Basecamp, one of the creators of Basecamp.
And hey,
Yeah, and hey, like partnered,
yeah.
yeah, the partner of Jason Fried's in general, like financial things.
Yeah.
And he's been very vocal about Apple, and he was very vocal about this, being like, "Wow, like nothing happened. It's just a 15% for like he stated that 98% of the revenue comes from non-indie developers. So
Yeah.
this change is like it's just I don't know. I'm always the negative part, which I hate it sometimes. But it's like this doesn't seem like Apple trying. Like this was just so easy to give out. They don't put anything on the line. It's goodwill. They probably help a little bit their case for the
antitrust.
like the case that the U.S. government, yeah, the antitrust thing. So I don't know. I feel like this is too little, too late in general. It's welcome for sure, but it's too little, too late.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree a little bit. You know, when I first heard it, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I thought it was pretty funny that, you know, like Epic is specifically not a part of that, and which is kind of ironic because they're the ones that's like instigated this whole thing. But yeah,
Very
like
much
Fernando said, most of the App Store revenue doesn't come from that 98% or whatever of developers who will receive this 15% cut. So it's like very PR, you know, wise looking very good, but realistically, Apple loses almost no money just because most developers don't make over $1 million. Now that said, is it $1 million ever? Is it $1 million per year?
So
Do you guys
if in
know?
a year you make
year.
under $1 million, then next year you are eligible for the 15%. And this is $1 million that you make, not that Apple has collected and then paid you 70% of. So
Okay.
it's 1.2
So realistically, it's more
of
like
sales,
a little over $1 million.
but once
Right.
you pass that threshold, then
There's-
the next year you're ineligible, and you have to wait another year of being below $1 million for it to kick in again.
Interesting.
It's just
I haven't
it's
looked
just
too much
badly
into that.
designed, to be honest. Because it's like if you're almost at the cap on December, it's probably better for
Pull your
you
app
to,
off of the App Store.
Yeah,
That's weird.
yeah, it is weird. And now that you mentioned it that way, like the 98% and the 2 thing, I know I already said it, but when you said it, I was like, wow, so they're giving a tax break to the 1%. All right, 98% of the
guess.
revenue, it's unchanged, and the 1 and 2%,
It's
like
the
oh
opposite,
yeah, you get
1%
15%
though, but
more.
that's a separate problem.
Right.
Yeah, I
yes.
don't know how to say that.
No, but you're right. You're right. Yeah. I mean, for them, it's like they're going to lose very, very little money, but like it helps them helps make them look good in this time where the entire, community essentially is mad at them and in one way or another. Maybe not everyone, but a fair amount. So I definitely think that this is some sort of like a PR stunt just to kind of get indie developers off their back, maybe on their side a little bit more.
Yep.
But then, the question is, people like Amazon and Netflix, they probably still get 15%. Like
Netflix
they
doesn't
did
get anything.
before.
They're
So,
out. They don't make
what
sales
happens?
for the App Store anymore. Yeah, all of their
Really?
sales are direct from their website. If you download the Netflix app, there's no way for you to subscribe or anything.
Oh, I know about Netflix,
Yeah,
but what about
got a
Amazon?
deal,
Didn't
but
they?
That's a business deal.
Okay.
I don't know anywhere else to say it.
Yeah.
The very cynical take is that if you are a developer making $1,000 on the App Store a year, this change from 30% to 15% makes no difference. You could have raised your
$1,000.
product by $1, and that would have made a more significant difference for you than this cut is going to do. cut in the most cynical takes is going to not really amount to anything, because ultimately the main problem is not the cut, it's the race to the bottom in terms of pricing, that a developer can't make anything.
Yep.
Whether you make 70 cents on that $1 minimum price or you make 85 cents, that's like, yes, that's an improvement, because you can't go any lower than that. Even though subscriptions, you can theoretically hit 50 cents a month if you really wanted to. But that's never been the problem. Whatever Apple takes, they could have taken 50%, and people would have been just as on board with the App Store up until now as they would have.
Yeah.
Like, Apple taking 30% was kind of a good deal back when they did it. So that's why it's kind of stayed for so long. And so many people have focused on this 30%. Let's take a quick look at who is focusing on it. It's people that are making way over $1 million in revenue a year, because that 15% is like free money for them. Of like, we've already optimized everything. This is the last thing that we can kind of push for. And it doesn't apply to them. So it's like, in the ultimate ironies of ironies, they are just kind of doing this out of spite for the most part. And like, again, ultimate cynical takes. Yes, an indie developer that has been consistently making around $100,000 a year from selling apps, yes, they are going to get a raise out of this. But the long-term effect of this, like, I think Stephen Troughton-Smith said, this is essentially canceled out inflation from the past 10 years of the App Store. So if you kept your prices the same, then you're kind of earning the same thing you were earning 10 years ago. And that's not an improvement. That's just things staying stable for the most part. And that's not something that can improve further. It's not like Apple can go another 15% and then another 15% after that. It's like, there's no more to go, really. So Apple's commission is not the problem. I wouldn't say you should focus on that. Focus on your price. Like, you set the price of your product, so you can set it at whatever you want, and you can target making whatever amount of money you need to make to keep your business going. That's ultimately what you control. You don't control the amount of taxes that you pay. Yes, taxes are kind of for the greater good. They don't really benefit anyone other than Apple when you pay them directly to Apple. So that's one thing. But they are your business partner. Like, they are what is enabling you to do business. If you can find a way to do business outside of Apple, then you don't need to rely on Apple. But if you chose to kind of be an iOS developer, then by the definition of it, you're relying on Apple, so you need to play by their game. And yes, we can think that, nowadays phones are kind of a given right almost, because without one, you are kind of left behind socially to such a great extent. So there are some very nuanced things, and the government probably should take a lot more control over how businesses can decide to operate these app stores. Even though there's one app store, everything else was not called an app store before Apple called it an app store. So there's lots of nuance as to like why things are kind of at this point. And I absolutely agree, governments should take more control to kind of set boundaries as far as what Apple can accept, what Apple can reject. They've so far been the good dictator, right? They kind of have been dictating in our favor, but all it takes is one person to kind of come in and change all of that, and then it will be a literal like shit show. Like, I don't know how to say it otherwise. You need one person to come into Apple and ruin it, and then we as developers have nothing, because we're kind of heavily invested in this one platform. But that was also our choice, right? As developers setting forth our careers, we chose to kind of embark on this vision because it's the thing that was most enjoyable to us. So there's a lot of people fighting on both sides to kind of make this better. I don't think changing the commission rate serves anyone other than those making over $1 million. If you make $100,000 and get an extra 20%, cool. You can maybe buy a car out of that. You cannot hire an employee to help you further your business. Like, that's not a thing. So you've increased the amount of well-being that you can get for your family, definitely. But in terms of growing your business and significantly changing things, it's not going to make a significant difference. Again, you could have changed your price and probably arrived at the same exact thing. Ultimately, we changed where the money is going, but it's the same amount of money in the end. that you would be getting. So I know it's not what a lot of people want to hear. The change is welcome. Like, I'm not going to throw it back because I'm never going to make it more than $1 million on the App Store.
Sure.
But as someone who makes less than $10,000 on the App Store from my own apps, like, it's an insignificant difference. It could have been like a good week that made that difference, as opposed to Apple changing that commission.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my app that I have on the App Store right now, as it is, barely pays for my developer,
and that's $100 a year for those who don't know. It's not a significant amount.
No, but I'm stoked about it, right? But 15 cents more, or no, I guess it would be 30 cents more, is, it's like nothing to me. It literally is not going to make a difference at all. My dad had this like interesting story that he would tell, kind of, Dimitri, along what you were saying, where, you changing your price is probably going to make a bigger difference. He would always say that, I live in Utah, and so, we have a bunch of ski resorts here, and there's this one ski resort actually really close to where we live, the closest one. And for a long time, I don't know if this is like the 60s or 70s or so, maybe the 80s, they were just kind of going downhill, and they would keep hiking their prices lower and lower, to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna be cheaper so more people will come. And it kind of had the opposite effect, where once they started kind of marketing themselves and saying, hey, we are, the same price, or they may have put their price a little above other ski resorts, that had like this perceived value of, oh wow, it's worth this amount of money. Not, it's like, oh, it's, $10 where everyone else is 30 or whatever. So there really is like this weird psychology behind this perceived value of something. So, if your app is 99 cents, maybe put it on the store for $2 or $3 or something. And honestly, that might make a difference, where even though it's, more expensive, it's a couple dollars, and most people are probably willing to fork out that money, especially if it has that perceived value of a few more dollars rather than just 99 cents, which is the lowest price.
And ultimately, if you have an app that is on the App Store and Apple's not featuring it, you're not marketing it, that difference, you're going to make the same amount of sales of the people that find it naturally. It's going to be the same people, whether they bought it at $1, whether they bought it at $3. So you're going to increase your revenue. Ultimately, we are all banking as iOS App Store developers. We are all banking on Apple to feature our work, because we're not product marketers. We are hoping that others will kind of take it and spread it by word of mouth, because there's not much influence that we as a developer can have externally to say, look at this great product that we built. You can pour huge amounts of energy into it, and ultimately it's not going to be seen, because there's a sea of apps out there, and like, you have to struggle to get noticed. And yes, you can play the SEO game of like trying to be the best result on Google and things like that. And if you know how to play that game, then you're not going to be struggling to begin with.
I think you've summed it up really well, in the sense that this is not very useful. There's a lot of problems in the App Store, like the transparency during your review, starting with a review opaqueness, like that totally sucks. Like, not being able to do anything when they say, no, you got to change this, and you're like, but I didn't have to change it like 3 days ago, and now you get a different reviewer, or they're implementing the rules differently. That's very, very frustrating. Or like, no viable upgrade path. Like, do you want to see indie developers happy? Make it so that you can purchase an upgrade, so that they can keep doing what they did in the Mac for years. Like, Tweetbot had to develop brand new apps, and then I'm pretty sure they lost a sizable chunk of their people when migrating from one app to the other. Like, if Apple were to do to give us a viable upgrade path, that'd be amazing. Or, I mean, you could also like have a TikTok for apps. Like, give me something that, like, because an indie developer can't develop that. Only Apple has the like Apple has the monopoly on app presentation and app store, everything related to the app store. So why don't you give me something that, just like you said, Dimitri, gives me exposure to people? Like an editorial, a feature is really amazing, but it takes time, it takes resources from everyone. Writing the editorial, getting the assets from the developer, getting the interview, getting blah blah blah. Like all of that takes a lot of time. Give me something that you can just blast to a billion people, and it doesn't have to be the same. Like just open up your phone. If you have a widget, you can see the app of the day, the most recently downloaded app in your radius. I don't know. Like there's plenty of other really important issues that Apple should be solving that they're not. And this just reeks of like hypocrisy. Like they're just doing it because of the Epic thing, because of the antitrust thing.
Yeah, it's a quick
Like,
solution.
It's very, very frustrating.
And they are steadily making progress. Like there were features to kind of see apps that are in use in your general area. So it's like what is in use by the people around you, basically, rather than the general populace. They are doing a lot more features, and they're not featuring one thing for 7 days straight. They're featuring different things multiple times a day. And they've drastically improved app review. They have a new system where they can go and submit an appeal publicly, so that way you can go ahead and get that improved. So they are making progress, but the 15% is not really where we want to see that progress publicly displayed. We want to see the progress in the other areas.
It's a very frustrating experience. I think I'll say one more thing. It's very frustrating for people to defend Apple on the internet for things like this. We're all in what is the watered down version of a cult? Like we're all in this.
Yeah.
We've all drank the Kool-Aid. We all want to see Apple succeed. We're in here for the long haul. But it's like you don't need to defend $1 trillion company for something that's not going to benefit almost anyone. There's huge problems that we need to solve, and this is not one of it. So I don't know. Very, very frustrating.
Okay. So segueing to a different storyboard, if you will. If you wanted to start development on the Mac, so as an iOS developer, kind of jumping to this brand new platform that apparently all iOS apps are now available on M1 Macs.
Can we pause real quick?
I need to interrupt.
Sorry.
Yeah, can I?
Fernando.
Can I step out for like 15 seconds?
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
I'll be right back,
Yeah.
and we can restart that thing. I'll be right back.
Oh, now Fernando's gone.
Yeah, I don't know if he closed his window, which would have been problematic.
Oh.
I thought he said, give me 15 seconds to say something.
No, yeah, you're good. It took me a second too. I was like, oh, he literally means to close the door.
Hello.
Hi. I thought you meant you needed 15
I left
seconds
the door open
to like say something. So I was like waiting.
Oh, that's what you said. Like, do you have anything else? And I was like, no. All right, yeah.
Okay, it was literally to close the door.
Okay,
Got
sorry,
it.
I'm back.
I skimmed over that first part of the sentence completely.
You're good.
No
Sorry
problem.
to cut you off there.
So segueing to a different storyboard, if you will, if you want to start development on the Mac as an iOS developer jumping into a platform where apparently all your apps are now available, you could use all sorts of different technologies. So there's AppKit, the tried and true dinosaur of the frameworks. There's UIKit, which is just as much a dinosaur at this point in time. There's Catalyst, which allows you to use UIKit on the Mac. And you can use it in one of two flavors, like pure UIKit, if you will, and then a mix of UIKit, but with AppKit controls that are backing everything. You have SwiftUI that you can use either via AppKit or via UIKit, or access AppKit controls via UIKit in Catalyst that are not available in UIKit. So lots of options that are available to you as a developer nowadays. What do you choose? So have either of you kind of jumped into this wild west of Catalyst on the Mac? And what do you think about all these options?
I began to very briefly, sort of when it was when it came out, and also I tried to use the what did he call it? The Marzipanify that Steve Troughton-Smith came up with before, Catalyst was even like an official thing that you could do. It's really cool. I think the biggest thing for me is, unless you put in a lot of work, which I completely honestly haven't, to make it feel like a Mac app. It feels like a half-baked app to me, and it kind of feels like more or less on the same page as like an Electron or a React Native app, where it doesn't quite feel like a native Mac experience.
Way more performant, to be completely fair.
And like, true, yes, absolutely more performant. But just feeling wise, it's like, okay, it's a single window probably. You don't get sort of a lot of just automatic macOS features that you would get if it was like a real Mac app. So for me, whenever I want to make a Mac app, I tend to lean towards just using AppKit. Not to mention, I am much less familiar with macOS macOS development than I am UIKit, so it's like an opportunity for me to learn. But it's really interesting, this dynamic now, where it's not just like Mac apps have AppKit, iOS apps have UIKit, but we have this like whole kind of spectrum now that you can be on. And for me, when Catalyst maybe grows, or maybe I just haven't looked into it enough, but I have tended to shy away from it. That said, I think SwiftUI is great, although I have noticed quite a few just random user interface kind of bugs in iOS 14, and I would assume that's because of SwiftUI. For example, in widgets, like the... I can't remember what they call it, like the smart widget where you can kind of scroll through different widgets in a single one. That one is buggy for me right now. Yeah, the stack. My HomeKit panel doesn't work on my control center. So, and I'm fairly sure those are all SwiftUI things. And so if Apple can't get it right, it's like, do I really want to start using this right now? Does this need to be fleshed out a little bit more? I think in iOS 14, they brought a ton of awesome SwiftUI features, like the lazy grids and everything, that makes it a lot more viable than version 1 was. But still, I just feel like I would rather stick with UIKit that has been fleshed out for a decade, and I know that it's going to work. UIKit.
AppKit has more than a decade.
Oh,
you
did
said
I say
UIKit,
AppKit?
but you
No,
initially said AppKit for starting out. So which is it, Spencer?
Oh, sorry.
I missed it.
UIKit for iOS apps
Okay.
is kind of what I'm going for. AppKit obviously has been around for much longer. My bad. So yeah, I don't know. It needs to evolve a little bit.
It
more,
does,
in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I haven't touched it a lot, but in general, I think Apple is, I feel correctly, resisting the standardization of everything. They are, like, if they really wanted to, they would have brought in something like that unifies all of the platforms. I don't think SwiftUI is that. It's going to be like a really nice base, but my expectation is for them to have a SwiftUI and then build on top of it like specific platform-specific UI elements. That's what I hope, certainly, because right now with AppKit, UIKit, Catalyst was a mistake. I don't see it as anything else other than a mistake. Like I think Catalyst is the iPad's iPhone app simulator, like something that it's likely that they needed to do just so that it's not completely barren, like, and it's a nice selling point. But in the end, we're just going to forget about it.
More than anything. Now, to be clear, you can build a truly great Mac app using Catalyst, but you need to put a ton more effort into it, including, but not limited to, private API usage, having an external bundle plugin that imports AppKit code into your supposedly pure UIKit code. So it's not such a clear cut, just go ahead and make it in UIKit if you're comfortable with UIKit, AppKit if you're comfortable in AppKit. As someone who kind of started off with AppKit, moved to UIKit when the iPhone came out, and then have come back and forth, The main selling point for UIKit is it's newer and more modern. You have less like cruft, such as NSL. NSL takes care of a huge amount of underpinnings for macOS. And even though it's deprecated, it's still heavily used internally. So you have very limited options in terms of customizability. For instance, on my Mac right now, I have Audio Hijack Pro running. Audio Hijack Pro has a very Mac-like UI that is not directly provided to you by the stock NS controls. They heavily customize every button to look the way it does, the window to look the way it does, scroll bars to look the way they do. And you can do this with AppKit, but you need to have known all the history that kind of went into AppKit in order to pull this off. You need to know what private APIs to subclass so that way you can change that functionality. It's not really documented anymore. There are the closest thing you can get are release notes from 10.0 days, 10.1, 10.2. Those are the ones that kind of outlined a lot of these major changes. And release notes have kind of become less and less over time. We get them for Xcode, we get them for the betas. We don't get them for the frameworks any more than we used to. So as a developer that has kind of done both, the biggest want from AppKit is not to replace it. It's to be able to customize it like you can UIKit. UIKit has a ton of customizability to go ahead and change how things work. So there's a lot of opportunity there for Apple to kind of improve things, and they have been improving things little by little. They're bringing over features from UIKit over to AppKit, but as soon as Catalyst came out, it feels like, oh, the writing's on the wall, AppKit is going away, when UIKit doesn't provide a replacement for any of that. UIKit is great for a single window, in fact, a single screen app. You have complete control over everything in the context of one thing. As soon as you have a powerful macOS app that has multiple windows, multiple panels, rearranging things that you can kind of fall outside of that boundary of the screen, UIKit can't help you there, even in Catalyst. You're kind of still limited to individual scenes. You can't have panels that are just completely detached that you can customize the way you want. You can't control the full screen experience on the Mac. You can't control multiple displays very well. There's all sorts of architectural things that are just not there in UIKit because they never needed to, and if they're stapled on, they're not really helping. Now, SwiftUI is a fresh take on everything, and it has a lot of promise in terms of kind of being the best world because it has specific APIs for the platform. There's some things you can only do on macOS in SwiftUI. There's some things you can only do on iOS on SwiftUI, and that's a good thing. That means that you have to think about how you're going to tailor your UI in different situations, but it can take care of a lot of that automaticness for you. The problem with SwiftUI is it's not built in SwiftUI. You have elements and controls that are all kind of provided for you. So here are your building blocks, but you can't build your own building block. You can't re-implement a scroll view or a collection view in SwiftUI. You totally can in UIKit. Before there was NS collection view, I built a two-dimensional table view from scratch, not using NS table view, but by manually laying out cells and calculating positions and having a flexible data model that can accept 1 billion cells. Like, it just works because you can go ahead and take care of all those little intricacies. In SwiftUI, you're kind of out of luck. You can use Geometry Reader to some extent. You can use the preference keys to some extent, but you don't have that full control that is available because Apple's not using that. They're using C++ to kind of do the layout for you and give you set building blocks. Fernando, you look like you have...
Yeah, interesting now that you mention it, because I remember doing that too, like building a table view or something just using a scroll view. It used to be that you need to do, like before they introduced collection view, you had to do it that way. It was that way, or you didn't present the data like that. But with SwiftUI, it's very different. It's Lego pieces. Like, this is your Lego block, and that's it.
I remember with UIKit, the only thing that in the many, many years of UIKit up until that point that was impossible to pull off yourself was the background blur that was introduced in iOS 7. You could literally build out any component from UIKit using UIKit up until that point. Like, Apple wasn't doing anything special under the hood. There was no magic. Like, yes, there were private APIs to use scroll views and table views in special ways that Apple's doing. Don't like it? You could build your own table view, and you can control that experience better than Apple could provide. You're on your own in terms of updating it and keeping it maintained, so it's a complete separate topic. But you could do it if you wanted to. And if you didn't use private APIs in the process, it would continue to work just the way you coded it. It wouldn't change over time. SwiftUI kind of doesn't allow for that. So until it can go ahead and do that, it's not a viable replacement for either. It's an addition, definitely. SwiftUI is awesome on both AppKit and UIKit for making very custom looking like widgets and controls on screen, just like core animation was when it just came out. It's like, oh, hey, you have this layer hierarchy, have at it. But you can't really introduce like views back into that. You just control the layer hierarchy from that point forward. SwiftUI goes a little bit further. You can mix and match and reintroduce. The only thing missing is kind of mixing and matching between UIKit and AppKit. Apple uses this internally, which is like with the there's an idiom basically when you make a Catalyst app. Do you want a UIKit Catalyst app, or do you want a Mac-like Catalyst app, which will use NS controls and things under the hood to give you native metrics and layout that is kind of comfortable for Mac users? Now, you can't go ahead and put in your own controls into there, and you can't do the opposite. The best of both worlds would have been you're on the Mac, you have an AppKit app, you want a UI view controller that you can just kind of present and show in a specific spot, go for it. You want to put NS controls inside of that UI view controller, go for it. That would have been the sweet spot, I think, that kind of allows for the most flexibility and allows developers to kind of build the best apps that they're comfortable building. Like there's a lot of AppKit that is just a mess if you want to customize it, NS control, NS cell. But the rest of it is architecturally sound. It's built for making powerful apps since the 80s. Like this is like a long time coming that AppKit has been building upon itself. UIKit is a branch from AppKit. Like it's taking the best ideas and kind of building them, but it was specific to the iPhone. It kind of got stapled onto the iPad, and now it's being stapled onto the Mac. But it's not really a replacement for either.
I'm
so
not
I would
necessarily
really
worried
Apple
about the direction.
Approach.
I think Apple has a pretty good track record of overall evolving things and making things work well, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time where it just doesn't quite feel as fleshed out as it could be. And hopefully within the next few years, we will get something like that where all of these different UI frameworks are sort of more intercompatible, where you can choose the best thing that works for your situation, and it isn't just like this high level overlay abstraction layer over whatever framework you're using, and you don't really have much control, because that's where like you said, UIKit, AppKit, you can make basically anything, and that's the cool part. It's more work, but SwiftUI doesn't allow for that. It would be nice for you to be able to do that if you wanted to, but also, if you don't care, then let SwiftUI handle it. But give you that option at the very least if you wanted to. So I think, oh yeah, I mean, with very little code, I think
all sorts of
coming
really,
from
really cool
all of us
things,
from
too.
Lambda School,
Like,
we've probably all
it's
seen
doing things that are
students
impossible in the other ones.
We're able to make some really incredible apps with SwiftUI in very little time, and I think we've all probably done that as well. The issue is when you start getting into a more complex app, then it becomes just like either near impossible or impossible to do something. So great for smaller things, but as soon as you start needing to make something complex, then that's where it becomes a little bit less viable, I suppose.
Fernando, so what's the verdict? If you're making a Mac app, what framework do you use?
If it is a Mac app, I would start with AppKit. Yep, definitely. If you're moving from an iPhone or iPad app to the Mac, I would still do AppKit, but I would try to make everything I can a framework. Like all the business logic, all of the modeling, like everything. Just try and make it a framework. It's probably going to be annoying, but it's going to be higher quality for sure. And just to address one point that Spencer made, I don't have high hopes for this. Like
true.
For the whole UI scene right now, Apple doesn't move quickly anymore. Like they're in general they're very very slow and conscious of the decisions. So I don't know. I don't see it. I see it improving. I don't see it like collapsing into one or two big frameworks again. I think Catalyst was a mistake. I don't know if
Yeah.
SwiftUI was a mistake at this point because it feels new and it feels like amazing. But we already have like what's going to happen with AppKit, what's going to happen with UIKit. The fact that we're asking like, well, what of these four frameworks should I use for developing for UI? Like,
Yeah,
that's
and
insane.
by the way, in
I
5 years,
doesn't make
one of them
They're
is
all
going to be
gonna
thrown out.
coexist.
Don't pick
I
the
don't
wrong
think
one.
it's just like Objective-C. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly,
just because we have
exactly.
this new
So,
thing, this new language, it's not like Objective-C has gone anywhere, and it's still widely used, including in many large apps. So I hope that it doesn't just UIKit or AppKit doesn't just go away. If anything, I think they'll probably continue to evolve together, and just the compatibility within them all will get better, hopefully.
Yeah, and even if one framework does get deprecated, it will be supported for a very long time. Apple has been excellent with this, but it's as if the writing is starting to appear on the fogged window of AppKit is on this way out. And it's not clear if UIKit is the best replacement for that. And it's clear that SwiftUI is not there yet. Like, it could be one more year, and then SwiftUI has all the capabilities to re-implement everything itself. And then at that point, like, might as well just go all in with that, because it's dogfooding itself in a way. It's not relying on AppKit. It's not relying on UIKit to provide a scroll view. It's just implementing a scroll view by itself. So if we can get to that point, then it will be clear like what direction to go in. But as it is now, it's very much an unknown. But because it's an unknown and Apple's not giving a clear guidance, that also means that use what you're comfortable with. Ultimately, nothing that we have today is going to go away significantly over the next few years. And unless you think your product is going to be a juggernaut that's going to be selling for 10 years straight, like, it's not really that big of an issue. If it is selling for 10 years straight, you are hopefully making enough revenue to keep that process going. As you make your UI refreshes over time, you can switch to different technologies, and that's up to you as someone writing apps. So the opportunity is
that's
there.
a good way to sum it up.
I just think it would be nicer if things were nicer. Okay, so this week's episode is brought to you by Pennant. Calling all sports fans. Want to keep track of the season, but there's so many teams and not enough time? Check out Pennant. Pennant provides sports standings at a glance. Pennant displays the league standings as a simple bar chart where the best teams rise to the top throughout the season. Of course, you can dig in deeper with team stats, game results, and more. Version 10 introduced the all-new customizable My Pennant view, where you can build a wide selection of visualizations for any sport, division, or team. Unlock Pennant Premium to add as many blocks as you'd like and put any of them on your home screen as a widget. Whether you follow MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, or MLS, Pennant has you covered, with more sports and leagues coming soon. Thank you so much to Pennant for sponsoring Code Completion. Download Pennant on the iOS App Store today to give it a try. So now that we've gone through our topics, it's time for Complete the Code, where we quiz our listeners on your knowledge of Swift, Apple, and all things development. So we have a winner for last week, Cody Morley, who said this was the coolest rabbit hole they've been down for a while. And this is regarding arc for random and what its etymology was. So although now referred via a backronym, a replacement call for random, this is but a mnemonic, one of those hard English words, as the original implementation was based on RC4, known as Rivest Cipher 4. That said, the algorithm was originally a trade secret, eventually spilled to the public, and the name was subsequently trademarked, leading to a different namesake, ARC4, or alleged RC4. The implementation of Arc for Random has since changed and now uses AES under the hood on Apple platforms, but that's how it got its name in all the craziness that is technology history. So since Ben is out this week, we'll be back with a new code, Complete the Code, next week. So if you have any ideas for good Complete the Codes that you'd like us to quiz our audience with, please send them over to us, DM us at Code Completion on Twitter, and we'd love to share them and give a shout out to anyone who has good ideas for Complete the Code. So that leads us to our final segment, Compiler Error, a segment where I get to test my fellow completionist knowledge about Swift, Apple, and all things development. Okay, so this week, by Fernando's special request, we have Esoteric Objective-C standard library features.
Ooh.
Great. So let's go to the first one. Tagged pointers encode their entire object into the non-addressing bits of a pointer, ultimately allowing faster allocations for specific hard-coded classes known by the runtime. Statement number 2. NS Zone's primary purpose was to allow objects to be allocated within the same memory page, so swap would be fast, and those objects could be freed in one go. Statement number 3. NSProxy is a non-NS object base class that allows for message dispatch to be easily redirected to another object, but does not have an initializer implemented for subclasses to fall back on. And statement number 4, __NSAtom is a special class that is ultimately the Boolean opposite to nil. Any message you send it will always return an __NSAtom, which is very intentionally equal to 1. So, Fernando, since you did so well last time, why don't you go first?
The returning champion. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I don't know. Tag pointers does sound like it would make sense. I don't know why it comes to mind. NS string, there's a specific name for the strings that you allocate using the @ sign and the quotes. It does seem like it would make sense. NS zones purpose does seem to make sense, though my Dimitri sense is tingling on that one. I'll leave that for later. NSProxy is the only non-NS object-based class in Objective-C, so that part is right. I don't know if it doesn't have an initializer, but I'm gonna think that the catch here is that NSProxy is the only non-NS object-based class. So I'm gonna say yes. NSAtom, I think that one just sounds very. I probably would have found about it already. It's interesting. I'm gonna go with number 4. Final answer. Because the others more or less make sense to me. NSAtom, I don't think I've heard of it, and if I have, I don't think it returns. It always returns 1.
Yeah, this predates me.
I don't know.
My language,
I'm gonna stick with 4.
I don't know much about Objective-C. That's the problem here. But I mean,
to be fair,
the amount of
these are
Objective-C that I've written compared to Swift is very, very little. So
modern.
I just, it's my own knowledge hampering me right here. Not even Dimitri's trickery. I would probably go with 2 or 4 as well. I guess I'll go 2, just so that we cover 50% of this. I have no explanation as to why, though. That's good.
Sounds good. So to be completely fair, these are esoteric features as a prefix with. So most Objective-C developers are not at all expected to know any of this. It's not something that you really need to use in your day-to-day life as an Objective-C developer. It's very much in the academic space of like how this works under the hood. That said, let's go ahead and take these in order. So let me find my shade. There you go. I have a layer called shade. So this is a sketch document if you don't know. And I'm just kind of like toggling on layers as we go to kind of make it an animated presentation. So let's start by number 1. So tag pointers encode their entire object into the non-addressing bits of a pointer, ultimately allowing faster allocations for specific hard-coded classes known by the runtime. So this one is, fortunately for me, the compiler error. So there were 2 bits to this that I tweaked to your downside. The first one is that tag pointers don't just encode their object into the non-addressing bits of a pointer. They use the entire addressing space of the pointer, which is just a number. So it's a 64-bit number on 64-bit platforms, which means there are lots of bits in there. So the way this works is memory is aligned to a word, which is, I think, 16 bytes. I could be mistaken on modern platforms, but I think it's 16 bytes. So if you have a pointer to something, it's always going to be in 16-byte increments, which means that the least significant bits in the pointer are never going to be anything other than an increment of 16. So you have a few zeros that you can just go ahead and manipulate there that are just not going to do anything because the CPU is going to ignore them, frankly. One thing you can do is set the least most significant bit to 1, and that will turn it into a tagged pointer. So basically, when Objective-C message send sees something that matches that 1 there, it will go ahead and just hijack the entire system and say, okay, this is a tagged pointer. Let me look at the next few significant bits to see what kind of tag pointer it is, and depending on what it is, we can go ahead and determine if it's an NS number, an NS string, and so forth. Now, the second sneaky thing I sneaked into here was that it's specific to hard-coded classes known by the runtime, and this is also false. So tags, I think 0 through 6 included, refer to NSAtom, 1, NSString, NSNumber, NSIndexPath, NSManageObjectID, and NSState, and allow for the remaining 60 bits. So think about it this way. You take 4 bits to encode one of those numbers, including that tag, and the remaining 60 bits out of 64 bits, you can do whatever you want with. So strings will encode strings in there. Numbers will encode anything other than a double, basically, in there. Dates, and so forth. Now, you can have more tags than that, and you can register them at runtime, which is really, really cool. So the next few bits allow you to encode up to 253 other tags. So you basically use an entire byte. And you can register them to be anything. So there's Objective-C register tagged pointer class. And assuming you pick a number that isn't in use, you can go ahead and register your own class as a tagged pointer. And Objective's message send will send the messages to your class to kind of operate on it. Now, you need to do your own logic to kind of fit things in those remaining 52 bits, because now you used more bits for the tag itself. But it's a very flexible system and very, very cool how it can kind of obviate the need to allocate memory in the heap. So you just have a stack pointer. You have everything in there. It's essentially a value type at that point, which can come around to bite you. Don't assume you can just compare NS number with equal. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So lots going on there, but it's a really, really cool technology to speed things up. And it seems that on the M1 Max, Objective-C message send is partially just run by the CPU. So it's not even assembly of individual instructions. There's an Objective-C message send component to the CPU itself that will just kind of hijack and speed up this whole process to be 6 milliseconds, I think, which is just ridiculous. So Objective-C takes the throne with its dynamic dispatch and its hand-tuned assembly turned into hand-tuned like logic gates, I guess, to kind of be the fastest it can, which is really, really cool. So let's go to number 2. So Spencer, you incorrectly thought this one was wrong, and you had no clue why, so I don't blame you. But NSObject was not even a class. It's a struct that was used pre what we know as Foundation and AppKit when there was no retaining and releasing yet. So you had a computer with 8 megabytes of RAM. That was a lot at the time, but you didn't want to swap all too often because the the hard drive next door was months away on your calendar for your appointment if you were the CPU. So to make things fast, you can allocate a zone, which is just one page of memory, and you can put a bunch of objects into there, and it'll kind of keep track of that for you. And then when it came time that you didn't need the zone anymore, you can just free the whole zone, and that would clear out every object. Remember, you didn't have a way of individually retaining and releasing specific objects, so you didn't know if things were using them or not. So you could go ahead and attach a zone to a window, and then when that window was closed, it kind of erases everything and keeps track of it a little bit more simply. So NS zones are not used anymore. I believe they're a no-op in today's Objective-C. That said, in Core Foundation, you can still set up custom allocators, which serve the same purpose. So it's an open realm for exploration if you really wanted to. I think Objective-C also has internal bits to stack allocate things, which would make them value types. You don't want to dynamically change the memory layout of that, though, because you can corrupt the stack. So all sorts of craziness happens in Objective-C in the name of performance as a way of getting around dynamic dispatch, which is frankly awesome, but much slower than like setting things in stone when things are compiled. So number 3, NSProxy is a non-NS object-based class, and it's not the only non-NS object-based class. You can make your own. I think it's the only one provided by the system that is public. I think there are others, and if you kind of go through the class list and naively just assume, oh, all of these like react to NS object-like methods, it will crash eventually. I've made that mistake when I'm kind of like looping through classes to see, oh, what are the subclasses of this base class so that I can automatically register them. You have to skip some entries because you will just crash if you try to ask for the class name. Basic things like that. So there are other ones, but NSProxy is special in that it implements the bare minimum of an NS object and nothing more. So it doesn't implement init. So that way, if you're proxying an object and you need to proxy that init, it will go ahead and proxy that properly. So it kind of leaves you to yourself to kind of allocate enough storage using a special method name that's not used by the object you're proxying. But other than that, it kind of doesn't implement much else. So gets the basic runtime logic implemented using the NS object protocol, which is similarly named, gets all this stuff done, but it just does that. So it's a very cool class, very specific use cases, great for kind of sticking yourself in between delegates and things like that. So do check it out. It's not hard to kind of make use of. It's fairly well documented, I think. Check out Mike Ash's blog as usual for kind of more knowledge on how to mess with these things, but it's all public API, so it's well supported. And this brings us to ultimately number 4, which Fernando, you had deep suspicions of. So to be fair, this is a private class. If the single underscore didn't like make that clear, the second underscore was like the nail in the coffin in terms of this is not public.
Well, I didn't think of it that way because you have to use underscore block.
Very true.
When using. Yeah, so I was like, I'd never.
So
heard
that's
of
to get
this.
around C.
I think it's a lie. Yeah.
Yeah, so it used to be that Apple said, hey, don't use underscores in any of your property names or any of your variables because like we reserve that. Eventually it turned into like your instance variables, you can use underscores because we know you're trying to be like Apple Senpai over here, so you want to put underscores on your variables too. So like they've kind of loosened that and they're used internally by app property. So that's kind of allowed, but that means that Apple's internal stuff now has 2 underscores. If you ever look at class dump to kind of see the newer stuff. And NSAtom is a special class that's hard-coded by the runtime, and it's a tagged pointer with a single 1 at the beginning. So if you remember the tag pointers, it's the tag for NSAtom is 0, which means the tag of 1, the first bit is a 1, the next bit is a 0, and then the rest doesn't really matter. The point of this is it's the Boolean opposite of nil. So if you send any message to nil, you get nil or 0. Same thing. If you send any message to NSAtom, you get 1 or NSAtom. It's the same thing internally. So there's a single instance of it. You can send anything to it. You'll always get 1. I don't know if that's used heavily internally. It is a useful like paradigm that you can kind of use if you're abusing the C language, and definitely if statements and things like that. Can this be misused? Definitely. That's probably why it's private. So it usually comes up if you search for it online. It usually comes up in the context of, oops, I accidentally sent an integer as an object to something, and everything still worked. But it only works on the newer operating systems and not the older ones. And that's because tag pointers are a feature of the new Objective-C runtime, and older OSs didn't necessarily have it. So
very esoteric. I will say, as to like comfort myself in my lack of Objective-C
great job
knowledge.
for not finding the answer. I'm always happy when that happens.
The last one was the best. This is probably the worst. Yeah.
So, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's a topic you'd like us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with all your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the app process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. So once again, I want to give my thanks to Fernando, who is at From Junior to Senior, that's FROMJRTOSR on Twitter, and Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SPENCERCCURTIS, for joining me this week. My name once again is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buniol, that's DIMITRIBOUNIOL, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.